take it away. How many pitches do you throw actually?
I throw 4 different pitches.
Okay.
4-seam fastball, just a normal standard 4-seam fastball right across the seams here. Sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling that day and depending on hitters and all that kind of stuff, sometimes I may move my fingers a little bit closer together.
What does that mean? What does that mean, depending on that day? Like, is that something?
How I'm feeling that day, control-wise, or however I'm feeling that day.
Do you like put them closer together and you just like notice like, does it go faster? Does it go? Like...
No, I'll get a little bit when I'm putting my fingers a little bit closer together. I get a little more arm sign run with my fastball, and then when I'm spread out, it gets a little bit more carry. I'm not typically a guy that is going to blow fastballs by hitters. Yeah. I don't throw very hard in today's day and age. Yeah. But I do have pretty decent spins and spin efficiency on all my pitches. So I use that to my advantage of setting up hitters. I take that into account. So
what about your thumb? Any movement of the thumb?
No, thumb. I usually find the label on the bottom side of the ball.
So you're to the side of it?
No, I'm usually just right on top of it.
Under it?
Right underneath it.
Okay.
Pretty much every baseball that I've ever thrown with will always have some type of logo on the bottom side. So here in Puerto Rico and in the States, we use Rawlings baseball. So my 4-seam is, my pointer will be right along the side, right along the top of the Rawlings logo, and my thumb will be right on up underneath the official Bola Oficial logo.
So with this index finger, it's on top of the seam, and then your middle finger is actually the crevice of the finger is in the seam. In the seam, correct. Really? And so when you go closer, like sometimes?
Same thing, same placement. Yeah. I just move them a little bit closer and just basically kind of throw it the same.
Yeah.
And
you don't throw a 2-seam?
No.
Why not?
Just never really have.
But you have natural 4-seam arm side run when your fingers are closed like that?
Correct.
Okay. And then what's your second most used pitch? Obviously depends on the day.
Depends on the day, depending on the hitter. Probably predominantly would be my changeup right now. Changeup is kind of a classic 4-seam grip.
I would not say that is classic. Sorry, I saw on the pitch design thing I did on you, I was looking at that. I mean,
that's pretty.
What grip is that?
I mean, that's pretty classic circle changeup.
Show this thing. What is that? That is not classic circle. I thought classic circle is you take your thumb and like hook that.
See that? Correct. But I like to have all fingers on baseball at all times. Okay. I don't ever really try to. Some guys like throwing their curveball like you.
Yeah.
You throw the spike curveball.
Not anymore. I'm changed.
So a lot of guys like manipulating the baseball a little bit differently. But with my changeup, I basically make a circle on the horseshoe of the baseball across the Rawlings logo. Pretty much every single one of my pitches, I base it off of the Rawlings logo. Again, I pretty much make a C on the horseshoe, depending on if I really want to turn it over and have some depth to it. I'll move my fingers a little bit closer and hold it so I turn over. I'm a big pronate guy, and pretty much all my pitches, I'm a big pronator. Typically, left-handers are.
I noticed that in the slow-mo too. It almost looked like you were like throwing the circle.
Correct.
Like at the ball.
Correct.
Like early in turn.
So, and if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it, that's why I throw everything off the Rawlings logo, because how it comes off of my hand. If I don't throw it with the Rawlings logo, something will show and something will be able to tell good enough hitters then recognize and see pitches differently.
Wow. All these 12-year-olds that are watching this are just like.
So there's my my changeup grip.
And you're consciously like moving again with this pitch, like the distance between these two fingers sometimes?
Correct. Early in the counts, I'll make it a bigger distance between the two, so it's a little bit. It's not as much depth. It's a strike throwing pitch that I'm just trying to get.
Is there a velocity difference?
I'm not really sure. I'm not a big velo guy, so I don't really go back and look at velos from start to start.
Is there anything you do with your body when you're throwing a changeup? Like I get asked a lot. Questions pertaining to like the velocity of changeups. Guys that have like a changeup that's like 2-3 off their fastball, and they're like looking for ways to like decrease the speed.
That was something in 2018 that I worked on. That we tried to get a little bit of a speed differential with my changeup, because my changeup was around that 3 to 4 range off of my fastball. So they wanted a little bit more of a speed differential. We tried multiple different things. We tried deadening the back leg and just kind of throwing it. That didn't go over so well.
Were you getting under the baseball?
Well, in that outing that I tried to do it, I gave up 7 runs in a third of an inning. Didn't go well. I went from having a sub 1 ERA in AAA to very quickly not having a very good ERA.
At least you had a scapegoat.
No, it wasn't a scapegoat because it was my fault.
Well, it was your fault, but it was like at the end of the day, you were trying a new grip.
No.
You were trying a new.
No, it was my fault.
Okay.
So, there's my changeup. Back in the day, I've always been a guy that was able to spin a pretty good breaking ball, a curveball.
Why you say back in the day?
Well, just as I was younger.
Did you used to have a better curveball than you do now?
No, it's been the same, pretty much the same pitch, my entire career. Now that I've raised my arm slot, it's a lot better because everything plays more. 12-6 allows my fastball to play a lot better and more efficiently through the zone. So my curveball, again, coming right off my fastball here, I go straight right off the horseshoe. I go my middle finger on the lace, pointer finger, right in, pretty much kind of like in the middle of the baseball. So
is it loose, or are you ripping it?
No, I mean it's pretty loose. I'm not a real firm believer in giving the baseball a death grip hold on any pitch. Some guys like that feel, some guys don't. But pretty much for all my pitches, I try to have a pretty loose wrist, loose grip. I love baseball and I love holding a baseball, but I don't love it that much to where, like, if somebody wants to take it from me, I'm gonna let it take. Like, you can get it out of my hand.
From me, I'll tell you that much.
So
back to the curveball.
Here's my curveball grip.
Are you changing your fingers on that pertaining to like the actual like count? Is there anything you do to get like a tighter one or an early one, or? No,
obviously effort level wise and what I'm trying to do with the pitch will. Early in the count, I'm just trying to get one over for a strike.
Where are you setting your sights on?
That's where I was going to go. Jumping the gun on me here, but
inside your head.
Setting the sights. I think that's a very. It can be something that can be very easy for guys to do, and that can also get into guys' heads and make it even harder for them to control different pitches. But for me. Like I said, depending on the count, whether if it's just a get me over breaking ball, I typically try to start it right over the catcher's head and letting it come, into the zone from there. And I'm capable of doing that now because my arm slot is a little bit higher than what it used to be. When I used to be a 2 arm slot guy, from this arm slot and from down here, I was having to set my sights completely different on every breaking ball that I was throwing. My slider from down here, I was, not necessarily crossfire, but crossfired because of the arm slot. And I was having to basically start my slider either at the left-hander's hip or behind him, depending on the count. If I was wanting it for a strike, I was actually having to, aim right behind, his butt cheek right here to allow it to come back into the zone. It had that much break on it. But now that I don't do that, and I'm pretty much from the higher arm slot predominantly, those sights change, obviously, are late in the count, 0-2, 1-2, I'm trying to put somebody away. Obviously going to set the sights a little bit lower, started at the catcher's mask to working down. But like you and I have talked about, it's not necessarily just that one pitch that I'm setting those sights on. It's, all right, I threw a fastball up in the zone and it had good carry to it and good rise and good life to it, and he swung through it, and I want to go to a breaking ball off of that. Where did that fastball come through the zone and come through that same tunnel and plane to throw that breaking ball off of? So that's where we're setting our sights off of there.
And it's actually a lot different than I first originally thought. And it wasn't until like I looked at like video, because I used to be like, all right, fastball up, like for a ball, swing and miss, and then I'd be like, all right, curveball. Now the curveball I have to like elevate a little bit because that's where the tunnel was. But like you'll see in video, like you throw a curveball in the dirt, it still comes out of that high tunnel.
Exactly.
If you're a 12-6 guy, like it's baffling how long that actually stays and how much drop you get. You probably get like 60 something inches of like drop.
Correct. So and that's like what we mentioned, depending on who you're talking to and what you're trying to get away and do, it can help guys when you're talking about setting sights and where you want to start pitches, or it can make it a lot more difficult for guys to realize it. When we go through our overlays and when you did that stuff, it's not necessarily, if you have a pitch that literally comes out of, and it's one baseball, and then all of a sudden at the 20 feet mark, it goes 2 different directions. Obviously that's elite and that's incredible. Yeah,
that's what everyone sees on Instagram.
Exactly. Like, I want that, but that's,
they're the best of the best for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So know, there's my curveball. I love throwing it. I throw it a lot. And then now to my fourth pitch, it's something that I've incorporated because I'm not dropping in 2 different arm slots. I've incorporated what I call a cutter slider mix.
Slutter.
So the slutter. Yeah. To righties, I make it a little bit tighter and harder, you know, breaking into their barrel, into their hands, back foot. To lefties, it's more of the slider. And it's not necessarily that I'm doing anything different.
You're going around this horseshoe right here?
It's same horseshoe.
With the middle finger?
So to righties, I typically try to get the middle finger on the lace and in the horseshoe, and I'm thinking fastball the entire time, and I'm ripping it off right at the last second.
That's the cutter.
That's the cutter to the righties. Now to lefties, I'll go a little bit on towards the side of the baseball, so my pointer is now on the lace, and I'm typically thinking the same thing, and I'm just throwing a fastball, but I'm letting my grip do all the work of manipulating the spin of the baseball. So.
And your thumb looked like it raised.
Correct.
So you probably get more depth.
More depth and more horizontal.
Movement.
So righty, my thumb is more tucked like a fastball with the middle finger on the lace. To the lefties, I'm going more to the side with my pointer finger on the lace, and I'm moving my thumb a little bit more up on top of the baseball.
And you're not manipulating the wrist upon release, right? Like
no, I'm trying to keep my wrist the same, and I think that's where I get into a little bit of trouble, and it spins out.
It's tough being a curveball and a slider
and a slider
guy.
guy.
That's the thing I tell like a lot of young kids do. Like they want everything, you know.
It is tough,
and it's hard, bro, because you just get so used to like the input of a certain pitch. Curveball, you're supinated. And then slider, like you just naturally kind of get over on the side, of the ball. And then because your brain thinks like I gotta create this axis, and then your body just tries to accomplish that task any which way it knows how. And sometimes it deviates that angle.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. I mean, you can say that about a lot of different things. It's like, all right, well, I threw a nasty 0-1 breaking ball, and he swung through it. But now 0-2, I want to try and throw an even nastier one rather than just throwing the same pitch. And all of a sudden we try to make it even more nasty, or nastier, however you say it. I don't really know.
What if you thought that?
And it pops out of your head, it pops out of your hand, and it's a strike breaking ball, and he hits it in the gap or somewhere. So instead of just throwing the same pitch, we try to do too much.
It's just trust, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day.
I literally look at that as like, because I'm like, I don't know if this is the right word, insecurities. Like you almost don't trust that your stuff is going to be repeatably consistent nastiness over a series of throws.
Of course.
And then so like you try to like get into a mental habit of making it better
than what it actually is.
And for me, better than like trying to be better with a pitch is I am earlier. You said it today when I was playing catch the curveball. You know, think later.
Think later.
Like
rather
when
than
I
early.
think be nasty, things are early. And it's the same thing with like a heater. If I'm thinking like, oh, I'm gonna freaking be nasty with this heater, I'm early and I'm probably sailing it non-competitive. You know.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there's a lot, like we've talked about, and we sit down in the bullpen on, you know.
Now that you're a bullpen guy.
Yeah. And we, you know, in the locker room or whatever, anybody can talk about grips and, you know, velocity and spin and efficiency and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, I think it's, you know, whether or not you got the cojones to go out there and put in the work and the time, and when the lights turn on at the end of the day and it's game time, that you know that, like you said, trust in yourself and trust in your stuff. Because like for me, I mean, you and I are obviously we're completely different because you're right-handed and I'm left-handed, but we still both spell our names
the same way.
The same way, and it doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't.
You know, so we're different in a lot of ways, especially on the game mound. We're different because you're, you know, a guy that throws the mid, high, upper 90s,
upper thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not that guy, but at the same time, I've noticed and I've come to realize that I probably won't ever be that guy, no matter what I'm doing. But I know that I can be just as successful,
productive too,
the type of pitcher I am, because I've realized it, and I'm going to try to make my pitches be just as efficient and productive against certain hitters without velo. And that's what I try to tell guys, you know, kids at my high school back home when I'm working with younger guys, is everybody wants to throw hard. Everybody wants to throw hard. Sure, yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's, at this day and age, I mean, that's what a lot of people want and look for. But at the same time, you don't have to throw hard to be successful. You can be, you know, a mid mid 80s guy in high school and still get a lot of outs. You can be a low 80s guy in high school and get a lot of outs. So it's just you know, making sure that every opportunity that you do when you do get the opportunity to get out on a field and play catch, it's not just playing catch just to play catch. You're using it as a purpose to get something out of it. And that's what I try to tell a lot of kids is, when you're out there playing catch and throwing during throwing program, it doesn't have to be a list of things that you're trying to, you know, accomplish. If it's one or two things, and it could be the simplest of things, fastball command. I'm gonna throw. I'm gonna
probably only be one or two things. And you go out and try to work on 30, and it's like I didn't accomplish anything.
Get anything. Exactly. So, you know, hit the guy in the chest every single time. I mean, whether it's just something as simple as that, or when you're on your way back in, throwing your change up from 90 feet, getting your feet moving and letting your hand work out front. You know, there's certain things that you can you know, make sure that you're doing every single day that you're out there on the field, just to make sure that, you know, you're getting something out of it.
Yeah, and it's so monotonous too, right? That sometimes it becomes hard to be super diligent and intentional with it.
Yeah, especially when you get older, especially for us, when, you know, you're in the grind of a season and you're out on, you know, game 138 of 142, and you've been going through throwing program for 7.5, 8 months, you know, from spring training to the end of the season. You're like, oh my God, this is the same thing again. All right, well then find something different that day to get yourself productive and get yourself in the best possible position that when you get on the mound the next time that you're going to succeed.
I would love to sit down and do like a whole podcast episode on literally like the dynamic for you getting into pro ball. Not saying that like your stuff was the worst out of your whole entire team, but like you made the big leagues with low 90 fastball, you know, and dropping down arm angles, where like in this day and age now, like you see 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, nasty sliders, and all these things, which is an easy influencer to self-conviction and confidence, right? Because like I throw 100. Like how many people do that? But you come in and you're like, okay, well, like, yeah, I know this is my stuff, but I'm really good at who I am. Like, how did you develop more confidence and essentially like self-conviction, kind of sizing you up against guys in the big leagues?
I mean, I think that's something that you could probably ask anybody that's been in the big leagues. That I don't think there's a certain answer in terms of what you're and what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, when I was, you know, when I started my career in indie ball and signed out of indie ball in 2011 and with the Red Sox and making my way through the organization, you know, it wasn't the easiest of things, because as you know, and people know, when you're in the, you know, when you're in the minor leagues and you're an indie ball sign, you're kind of at the lowest of lows on the totem pole. So you're not going to get every opportunity that, you know, everybody else does. But through that process, when you still have a jersey hanging in your locker, when you walk in the locker room every day, you still have an opportunity. And that was, I think, what got me to that point of getting myself over the hump, was because I used that mentality of, hey, listen, man, I still got a uniform in my locker. I still get to put on baseball cleats every single day. And I used that not only during the season, but during the off season, of making sure that I'm going to put in the work during the off season, that I know that I'm working probably as hard, if not harder, than anybody else in the organization, because I know what I want and I know what's going to take. It's going to take a little bit more than what other people might have had to do to get to that point. And then, you know, I had a really good second half of the season in 2013. Went to Double A in 14, had a really good year all year in 14. Went to the Fall League in 14, and that was when, in the Fall League, we messed around with dropping down. In 2014, I had not like super drastically, you know, reverse splits, but... So
when you guys signed at Indie Ball, you weren't doing the drop down? Oh, that was something that happened?
No, that was something that I started doing in the Fall League of 2014. I did it for my last outing in the Fall League. And it was something that I took to spring training. Was
it hard at first? Like, was it like you weren't throwing strikes? Or?
It wasn't throwing... I mean, yes, to answer your question, yeah, because it was a little difficult going, you know, in a certain situation where it was left, right, left. And I was going lefty from down here, righty from up here, and then lefty down here. So, you know, bouncing back and forth right off the bat wasn't the easiest. But just like with anything, you know, it's going to take time, take reps, and by the halfway point of 2015, towards the end of the season in 15, was really when it started kind of like clicking for me. And then 16, I started the year in AAA, and then ended up, you know, getting the call in at the end of 16, and you know, the call that everybody, you know, hopes and dreams of going to the big leagues. So
do you think the drop down thing had a huge like factor in you getting to the show?
I think so. I think it did, because it put me into a different category because of my effectiveness of getting left-hand hitters out.
Were you not good at getting lefties out? Is that what
it wasn't that I wasn't good, I just wasn't good enough.
Okay.
I don't think if I wouldn't have done this, I don't think I would have made it to the big leagues.
Really?
But now with the 3-batter minimum rule and all that kind of stuff, you know, things change that, you know, coming out of one arm slot, a lot of teams, and what we were doing towards the end of 2018, what our manager wanted me to do was try to get something that was only coming out of one arm slot instead of having to go back and forth. So that was something that when I got traded to Arizona, and actually that was in 19 when I got traded to Arizona, is when I kind of stopped dropping down. I was predominantly and that's when I started throwing the cutter slider.
And that was your decision?
Not necessarily. I think it was a combination of everything. The advanced pitch metrics and all that kind of stuff. The data
just coming out.
Was just starting to adapt, and I started throwing the cutter and slider from the higher arm slot, along with the changeup and curveball, and everything data-wise was, you know,
check the box.
Yeah. So they were like, you know, let's stick to it. Let's just, you know, let's keep it that way.
Right.
You know, and here we are now.
Thank you for your time.
Of course, man.
I appreciate it. Now
Absolutely.
that we're eaten alive by mosquitoes.
Yeah, mosquitoes are pretty bad.